Welcome to another edition of the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
That's Blake Aaron, and I'm Tina Anderson.
Welcome once again to the Blake Aaron Radio Show, and we are so pleased to have with us today Jon Anderson, the voice of Yes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great
today,
to be
Jon.
with you there.
I want to thank you, for almost 50 years of great music. I mean, from a personal note, I've been listening to you since, I was just a kid.
Yep.
And this is a great moment for me. And just thanks for 50 years of great music. And thanks for, I'm finally not the shortest guy in the room. So.
Thank you. No. No, it's been 50 years. It's kind of amazing when I think about the idea of 50 years making music. I was in a band with my brother in the end of '62. And we actually went to see the Beatles just before they became famous. They just released Love Me Do, and me and Tony went to see them play in Southport, which is just north of Liverpool. And from that moment onwards, I just wanted to be a Beatle. That was my life.
Did you learn a bunch of Beatles tunes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
That's how you survived in the 60s. You used to sound like the Beatles one minute, then the Beach Boys the next minute, then Everly Brothers, then Joe Tex and Nina Simone, and I even sang like Shirley Bassey at one time. They reviewed me one time. I'm the Shirley Bassey of rock and roll. Because I sang Goldfinger, because Goldfinger was pretty cool, and we used to play that theme. Dun, 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 dun. Goldfinger. So stupid. But hey, you'll do anything to keep going, you know.
Does your brother still play?
No, he actually left the band after about 3 years or 4 years and got married and had kids and got a job. But
got a real job?
Yeah. But then he actually became sort of a pastor and sang songs to the flock that he still sings to. He has a small group of people in the south of England on an island called the Isle of Wight. And he has his little church, and he sings songs of praise and things like that, which is beautiful.
Oh, wow.
He's a great guy.
Cool. So
Totally.
you guys still close, keep in touch?
Yeah, well, we email each other now.
Right.
And, I'm in touch with my other brother, Stuart. And my sister, Joy, she's in heaven at the moment. And she used to come to the shows that I used to do with Yes. And they'd all love that, your siblings. They just love what you do. And thankfully you're not driving a bus, maybe.
That's true. Well, you have, such a wonderfully unusual voice. When most people, when you talk about a 3-octave range, they're talking about full voice and falsetto.
Gosh, yeah.
But you don't have a falsetto. That's 3 octaves of full voice.
I think it's because I smoked a lot of cigarettes when I was
Get rid of your falsetto.
14. And I couldn't sing falsetto, so I shouted very loud. And learned to sing high in a full-throated not scream, but just a voice that just stayed up there. In fact, I was told at school to shut up. Anderson, stop being so loud when you're singing with the choir.
Oh, because you stuck through, huh?
But, miss, I'm enjoying myself. I'm sorry, Anderson. Go and see the headmaster.
Well, so you did sing in school?
Oh, gosh, yeah. I was in the choir and all that stuff. I just love singing. So me and my brother used to deliver milk. I was delivering milk when I was like 11, 12, 13, 14 years old and working on the local farm. So we used to sing Everly Brothers songs and, Buddy Holly songs and things like that all day long. I mean, that kept us going. Just loved the idea of singing.
And at what point did you kind of feel like, well, you know what, my voice is kind of unique, more unique than some of the songs that you're trying to sing, and maybe I need to kind of start focusing on my own music?
No, I didn't think about this at all until probably around Fragile Close to the Edge, when people would say, what a unique voice. And I'd say, yeah, well, I have to sing high because the band are making so much racket. They're playing all this music. I got to sing on top. I can't sing in the middle of them, Right. So I generally start writing songs that I was always kind of above the band vocally. And sometimes when I listen to those records, I think I was on a helium. Sometimes, You know, especially there's an album called "Going for the One." Man,
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
I'm up there on another planet.
I think on one of your albums, from what I read, you actually hit a high E,
Oh yeah,
which is, I mean, that's soprano.
I can do it now if you want.
Sure.
No way. I can do. Now I do a D.
Okay.
I'm a tone down
so
than I used to
you've
be.
gone down a whole step.
A whole step.
Not bad for 50 years. Only going down a whole step.
No, I'm pretty happy the way I sing at the moment. I'm enjoying every show that I do. I just love, you know, I sing at home every day. I go in the studio and sing ideas and new songs and projects that I've been working on. So I'm kind of busy on that level. So I sing every day. It's more like an exercise for me, like an enjoyment of life.
You must take very good care of your vocal cords because almost 50 years of singing that high.
Yeah,
Most
I
people-
stopped smoking 20 years ago, so that helped.
And you have a very healthy lifestyle
Oh
now.
gosh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I nearly died 3 years ago, and when you nearly die, you just really start looking after yourself, you know.
I read about that, and you know, thank God you're still with us. And
Well, everybody goes through it. You know, I was very surprised. You get stuck in hospital. I had about 7 operations, so I go to hospital every month for 7 months. And all these people in the hospital were amazing, the doctors and the nurses and things. And there are a lot of people still there that are still stuck in hospital, and God bless them. I'm
Right.
fine. I was just in there like Jiffy Lube, you know, fixing the engine,
right,
you know.
quick overhaul, and
Yeah,
you're ready
that
to
was me.
go back out on the racetrack.
Get in, get out.
Well, we're so glad that you know that went well, and that you're recovered, and that you're out there and singing. How I know that you've always been a very spiritual person, but how has that experience changed your way of looking at your music, your way of looking at life?
I think when you get that close to a death experience, you value every day a little bit more, and every day I feel that I see things a little bit differently. I see nature on such a different level. I was always in tune with nature because, as I said before, I worked on a farm, so I was connected to nature when I was a child, you know. And you go and live in the big city and you forget about it. And then eventually you're drawn back into Mother Earth because that's who you are. You're part of the Earth Mother. And especially this last 2 or 3 years, I've really, really reconnected with the glory and the abundance that is truly is life, which is nature that surrounds us, and the stars and the clouds and the sky and the colors that surround us. And that's the abundance of life.
Yeah.
It's got little to do with money.
That's right.
Money's on a different level. So when you look at the nature that surrounds us and the wonderful Earth Mother, that's what really draws me very closely to the new music that I'm writing now. It's a lot to do with the sort of histories and ideals that we've slowly sort of forgotten, and we are slowly remembering. We are waking up in a slow process of waking up to realize who we truly are and why we live on this beautiful earth. Ta-da!
And that's great. What have you felt through this? Obviously, your purpose here is to create music, but have you found yet even a deeper purpose by going through this?
I think when I was working with younger children, teenagers, and that, it all started 10 years ago when I decided to do solo work. I was getting very, very exhausted touring with Yes, and realizing that physically I couldn't do these tours that I used to be able to do so easy when I was 40
Sure.
and when I was 50. But when I hit 60, I got sort of, physically I wasn't able to do these long tours. And I said to the guys, I need a break. Can we have a break? Can we do less and less dates per year? And Rick Wakeman agreed with me, you know, and the other guys, no, we got to go on the road. We got to be doing, okay. So I started rehearsing a solo show. And I went to the local high school to borrow the theater so that I could stand on stage and felt what it was like with a guitar. And the teacher said, what's your name again? I said, John Anderson, I just live up the road. Well, if you want to use the theater, yeah, you can use it, but you got to do a class first. You got to teach these young people something about what you do. And I said, oh, that'd be cool. So I'd go down and sing to them and talk to them about what I understand life to be. And then I'd ask them questions, and they would ask me questions. It was that kind of thing for about an hour. And one of the questions I asked them, I said, I want to know why we live.
Right.
Because that's the big question. Why? Why do we live? And this one girl stood up and she said, to find God. I said, true, so true, to find the divine, to find God within.
Right.
That is the only reason we live. You can have a big car, you can have a big TV, you can go and watch your games, have a few beers, go dancing, listen to music, da-da-da-da, have a great life. But the only reason you actually live is to find the divine.
Right.
And that's the truth. And that came from this little girl.
And you've actually worked with a lot of different people in all kinds of areas of spirituality, even a contemporary Christian band, For Him, I think? You worked
Yeah,
with
well, they were I was in a studio in Nashville. I was actually doing some writing with a guy, wonderful guy called, and I can't remember his name, Robin Crow, great guitar player. And I was actually working on an album with Yes in Vancouver called The Ladder, and we had Christmas off, so me and my wife Jane packed up our bags and went to stay in Nashville, and I was recording some songs with Robin Crow, and next door For Him were performing and creating their album, and they heard that I was next door to them, so they came in like, hello John Anderson, how are you, can you come and sing on our album? I said, yeah. So I went in and sang this chorus on one of their songs, which
cool.
became quite a big hit.
Wow.
So that's how things happen, you know?
Yeah. We've got so much more coming up with John Anderson right here on the Blake Aaron Radio Show. It's the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
That's Blake Aaron, and I'm Tina Anderson.
Hey, it's the Blake Aaron Radio Show, and we are back with John Anderson, the voice of Yes, and having a great time. What a great place to have an interview right here in the garden. I'm glad that you chose this at Humphreys in San Diego.
The palm trees, listen to those guys.
I know. It's like I'm in Hawaii or something.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, sure is. And, John, you will be having a show very close to here on tomorrow night, actually, the 22nd, at Anthology, doing your own solo stuff, and it's just you, right?
Right, it's me, a guitar, and a laugh and a smile, and I play the ukulele, the dulcimer, I play the piano, just the white notes. I can get away with that.
No sharp keys, don't flat
No,
keys.
gosh, no. But actually, now I'm starting to do one song just on the black keys, which is Heart of the Sunrise.
Key of F sharp.
I just figured it out, you know. It's a good, fun show for me. I enjoy doing it. It's a little bit like walking a tightrope every night, because I realize I'm singing probably 2,000 words. It's 2 hours long, and I sing a lot of lyrics, you know.
And with Yes, you used to have those big instrumental breaks where you could just kind of hang out.
I know. In fact, I think I sing more than I've ever done in my whole career. And I talk about stories, how things happened, how songs happened, who I met along the way and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting to me. And then the audience enjoy themselves as well. So it's a good show.
Good. I've heard I know that you have a million great stories, probably both with Yes and doing the solo stuff, and also the stories about how your songs came about.
Yeah.
Specifically, I heard, rumor anyway, that you have a really interesting story about being in the Falkland Islands during...
Oh, yeah.
Or in Argentina during that war.
Yeah, the war had just finished, and we were the first English band booked to Argentina, and this was when we were really big, like sort of I was definitely 7'3", and we had "Own of a Lonely Heart," #1 around the world, and we went there. But we actually didn't stay in Argentina. We stayed in Uruguay, next door, getting ready to go and perform in front of 100,000 people in a stadium. And then the president of Argentina rang us 2 days before the show and said, we had it on speakerphone, and he said, we seem to have a problem with a lot of people. They hated the English and the British for the war in the Falklands, and so there's been death threats against the band. And I said, death threats against the band? What do you mean? Oh, yes, they're thinking that somebody's going to shoot the band when they're on stage. And I said, I'm going home. So, oh, please, Mr. Anderson, yes, the band must come. You people will change things with your music, and everybody will have a great time. And I said, no, I'm going home. And I think Alan White passed me a joint, and I smoked a little bit and thought, hey, okay, let's go, it's rock and roll. And we got there, and just before we went on stage, Chris Squire, the bass player, turned around and said, hey, you know who they're going to shoot at first, don't you? And I said, oh, damn, the singer. So I ran around that stage that night. It was kind of amazing. I tell this story every show, so.
That's a great story.
And then I play "Own of a Lonely Heart." It's just fun. Right. But it was an incredible moment. You know, he said they're going to shoot the singer. And in fact, they recorded that show for TV, and it's one of the best shows Yes ever did. Wow. We were really playing good.
Nothing like a little stress to
talk about
make
stress.
You sing better, huh?
Damn, yeah.
I mean, can you just imagine if the sniper was actually out there, trying to follow you, and after a while he says, I'm not getting paid enough for this. And
no,
no,
but the stadium was surrounded by about 2,000 militia with guns.
Oh, is that right?
I thought it could be one of them. Was going to shoot me. Oh, boy.
Well, you were telling us earlier off air that you actually don't like your speaking voice.
Well, I don't think many people do. They always think they sound really cool, and then they hear themselves back talking. I like my singing voice, but talking I'm never that keen on. In fact, my friend Bill, who's here with us, Bill Kilpatrick, we've done a project together called Violin Stories, and he actually said to me a couple of weeks ago, because I've written a story about violin stories, and he said, well, why don't you do like a narration over the music, because Bill's done this amazing music based on some themes that I sent him, which were violin pieces of music, and he said, try it, and I said, okay, but I wasn't that keen, I wasn't really keen on doing it. And so I did a little bit. I think I did the first 2 stories, and I sent it to him, and I said, what do you think? And what did you say, Bill?
I said, this is beautiful. It's fantastic. And it's
Thank you, Bill.
More than I hoped it would be.
Thank you, Mr. Bill.
Truly. If I can pick up on what you said, you're right. None of us like the sound of our speaking voice when we hear it back after it's been recorded. We hear it differently in our own heads.
Sure. Singing voice, too.
Back, when it comes back through speakers, we uh-oh.
It's true. But, I must say, the music that Bill has created, gosh, I could never have dreamed of anything like this. And we met through the internet. One of the things that I sort of got into a few years ago, about 6 years ago now, was using the internet as a meeting place for musicians, where I put an advert on my website saying musicians wanted, and I got a lot of replies from different people. I said, just send me 1 minute of your musical style, and we can work together. Wow. And that's basically how I started meeting lots and lots of people, and I'm working with maybe a dozen people on a regular basis now on so many different projects. And with Bill, it was the idea. I'd heard some of his music, and I just wondered if he'd be interested in helping put together a violin concerto. That's what I was thinking, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And so I sent Bill some themes that I've been thinking about. And please, what happened?
Is that the Surfing with God?
No.
This is
it's a different one? Okay.
This is Violin Stories.
Okay.
And it's just about an hour-long work, 7 movements.
Wow.
And as I recall, I was orchestrating, I think I was into the second or third movement, had sent some of what I'd done to John, and you wrote back and said, this is a ballet.
Yeah.
So we sort of shifted gears from violin concerto to a ballet idea.
Wow.
And John wrote this amazing story, as only he can, about this crystal violin, and I think I'll let you take it from there.
The idea came that we had this beautiful violin and music and score that Bill was creating. And I kept thinking, well, maybe the story is like a violin player who's just a street busker, and he's searching for food in a dumpster. He's down on his luck, and he finds this metal suitcase, and inside is this beautiful crystal violin. And he picks it up and starts to play, and he gets zapped to Tibet, and all of a sudden he's playing to these indigenous people in Tibet, and they're dancing around him, and he gets into this like a magic carpet experience.
Sure.
And so every movement is a different place around the world, and it finishes up in Ayers Rock in Australia. And the idea is to wake up our understanding of indigenous people, because we are indigenous people. We tend to forget. We think we are above them, which is bull. We are indigenous people from way, way, way back, and we should reconnect with them because they are the caretakers of the earth, and that's what the thread of the story is. And then all of a sudden we got in touch with the guy who's a comic creator. He creates the visual parts of comics, and he wanted to do a comic version of the story. So he did some beautiful storyboards. What's his name? I forgot his name.
Juan Baez.
Juan Baez.
JC.
Two Baez. No. But he's a sweetheart. I met him a couple of times, and now we're thinking, wait a minute, it's a story. It's a comic. It could open up out of a comic into reality of sorts and become even a movie, because like anything, you use music and stories like a teaching tool and an understanding, and why not make it into a full-blown musical sort of storytelling, live action, dance, everything, because we started thinking like a ballet would be perfect for the music, and then it just opened up into more than that. So it could be a ballet, it could be put on stage as a musical with storytelling, but it could actually become a movie with the modern technology that we have these days with CSG. Is it CIG or CIS? Something like that. CGI. That kind of thing, So anything's possible. But Bill's unbelievably good.
Well, I'm actually surprised that I've known Bill for years. We went to school together. We went to college together, and I didn't even know that you did orchestral arrangements. That's you learn something new about someone you've known for many years. Yeah.
You can't let all the tricks out of the bag at once. You got to space it out over the years.
That's right. You gotta.
And he's a surfer dude.
And that's where Surfing with God came from.
Did you ever surf, John?
I tried a couple of times. I actually stayed in San Clemente. I went to stay there for a weekend. I stayed there 3 months at the Beachcomber Motel, right on the beach. It's the most beautiful place in the world.
Right back with more
on the Blake Aaron Radio Show. Hey, it's the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
That's Blake Aaron, and I'm Tina Anderson.
Welcome back to the Blake Aaron Radio Show. Once again, actually, not our in-studio guest, our out-of-the-studio guest.
Out of this world.
Out of this world.
Woo.
We're having such a great time at Humphreys outside in the beautiful trees and birds, and it was a great idea that John had. John Anderson from Yes is our guest today, and just having a great time. And we've been kind of jumping around a little bit from what John is doing now with our good friend Bill Kilpatrick, and wanted to go back into a little bit of in history. I know you met Chris back in 1968.
Yeah. I was working in a bar above the Marquee Club, which is a very famous club in London. And the bar above it is called the Chase, or the Chasse Club, French, Le Chasse, the Chase. And I'd be cleaning up, tidying things up and get a little bit of money, I'd been with my first band for nearly 6 years, and then I left them in Germany because they wouldn't get out of bed and rehearse. It's true. They told me to F off. I said, oh, okay then. Or, as Rick would say, walk away in short, jerky movements. Not Rick Wingman. Anyway, so it was about 5 o'clock in the evening. There was nobody in the bar, except this one guy, a very tall, skinny guy, Chris Squire. And the barman who ran the place said, why don't you go and speak to Chris? He's a good bass player. They might be looking for a singer. So I went over and we started talking, and we had a similar understanding about music and what music could do and everything, and went back to his place and wrote a couple of songs. And then he had a band called Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. And I said, that name is too long there, Chris. We've got to get a short name after a couple of weeks rehearsal. And eventually the guitar player, Peter Banks, said, well, why don't we call ourselves Yes? Because I said, well, why don't we call ourselves Life? And Chris said, we'll call ourselves The World. Good old Chris. And, and then Pete said, yes. And we kept saying, what are you talking about? Yes. Just yes. Really? Oh, okay, let's try it. So we went to see a couple of friends, and we said, we know what our band's called now. And, of course, it became like that Abbott and Costello, who's on first sort of thing,
Right. Yeah, but what's the name of your band?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's what we did. We got on the road, and we had a lucky break within about 6 weeks of playing. In fact, Bill Bruford left the band. He was in the band. He left the band to go to Leeds University to become an accountant.
Is that right?
I know.
Wow.
What happens?
He wanted to get a real job, too.
Yeah, exactly. So we carried on with another drummer, and
Was it Alan or?
no, it was a guy who was in a band from Liverpool, who was pretty good, but it wasn't that together emotionally. And we actually went up and played at Leeds University, and Bill was in the audience listening to the songs that he'd learnt with the
Right.
band. And he said, after the show, he said, you guys are good. And I said, yeah, and we're missing you. You got to come back in the band because we're going to play with the Cream in 2 weeks' time at the Albert Hall, because we got this lucky break to play with the Cream. And he came back in the band, and that's how it carried on from there, But the way we got it, the gig with the Cream is very interesting. We were living in central London. Most of us were living in these apartments, and Peter Banks was living in North London. And we got a phone call about 5 o'clock one evening, and a friend of mine said, look, can you do a show tonight at the Speakeasy, a very famous club, And I said, yeah, man, thanks, He said, because the band that's supposed to be playing hasn't turned up, and they're a very famous band. And I said, okay, who is it? And he said, Sly and the Family Stone.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what happened? He said, well, he got caught in New York airport
Gotcha.
with some drugs or something. And we said, okay.
Literally caught.
Hey, so we'll do the show. So we started setting up at about 10:30, and people started coming in at 11 o'clock thinking it was Sly and the Family Stone.
Sure.
And of course, Paul McCartney was there, and Keith Emerson, and Jimi Hendrix, and all these people were all sitting down. And most of them used to come into the bar. So they knew who I was. And they'd say, John, what are you doing? I said, we're putting on a show tonight. What happened to Sly? I said, I think he got busted.
Oh, man.
I said, don't worry, guys. Everybody drink a lot. And if you want to smoke, please smoke. Because we're not that good. So we put on a great show. You know, we had a real good time.
And were the audience, it would make a Sly and the Family Stone is great, but it's
No.
talk about different than Yes.
Well, it was totally different. But people loved our show. And then the manager of the club became our manager. And then within 2 weeks, we were doing the Cream concert. Talk about getting a break.
So how was that subsequent concert, the Cream concert?
Well, we felt very small and tiny.
I bet.
Because it's a big stage. The Albert Hall stage is very, very big. We opened up, and I think we set up our gear more to the right of stage. I don't know why. We felt very tiny. And we played, and it was okay, but we were scared stiff. Then the other band that was on was Rory Gallagher, a great guitar player,
Sure.
blues guitar. He did his show. And then the Cream came on. It was like chalk and cheese. It was unbelievable. They were amazing.
I bet.
In fact, there's a movie of them doing that show.
Now, at the time that you guys were writing songs, progressive rock was just at its birth.
Yeah.
Were you? What was the motive? Were you actually thinking we want to be a progressive rock band? Were you just thinking we want to come up with some stuff that's unusual, it's different, it's not?
Well, at that time, the most important thing was to create music for stage. Wasn't never interested in creating music for an album. You create music for a show. So you create music that would work on a live performance. So one of the things I didn't like, because I'd go and see a band and think, oh my God, that solo was amazing. Then I'd see him a week later and the solo was terrible. And I said to myself, well, if you can construct
Sure.
the music better, then the band can always be good. Because
Sure.
sometimes a band can have a bad night, you know, because the guitar player's playing bad solos and it's not really happening and everybody's in a funk. You know, I didn't want a band like that, like a blues band, R&B, rock and roll band.
Right.
I wanted a band of musicians that would create a sort of, like a musical score.
Mm.
So I started talking to Chris about this in the very early days, that we'll use music that we know, like we did a song which was No Experience Necessary by Richie Havens, and we used the theme from the Big Country theme, which is a great piece of music for a movie called The Big Country.
Yeah.
That was the solo. So I was into construction of music at that time. So by the time the Yes album happened, you know, I really felt that we were creating our own style of music, so that when Steve would do a solo, you know, Peter Banks would be the same. He'd do solos, and some nights he wouldn't do very good solos. But he was brilliant, but
Right.
sometimes not. It was kind of very frustrating because you want to be on this level all the time. So with Steve, I'd work out a lot of the solo structures with him
Really?
because we were very close, and we had this certain harmony within the band, you know, and everybody listened to what I was suggesting over that period of time, especially the first 5 years of the band's life. You know, I had this definite director position where I would come in with ideas galore, because I was listening to Stravinsky and I was listening to Dvorak and all the classical composers, and I realized how it worked and how structure would work. So in a way I was like in the middle. I was the singer but also artistic musical director a little bit, and they were very willing to help and listen and come up with ideas on top of my ideas. So when you listen to Yes music, it's a well-structured idea,
Yeah.
and that's why it survived, I think.
Right.
We weren't just sort of flavor of the year or flavor of the month. When punk and disco came,
Right.
Yes still had its own style of music,
Right.
you know, and we were very lucky in that way. Did that answer your question?
That and about 10 others.
I ramble.
No, it's great. I think, now, did the other guys in the band share your passion for listening to classical music? I know that you opened some of your shows with Firebird Suite and...
Yeah. Well, you know, Rick Wakeman,
Sure.
and of course Steve Howe was studying... wait a minute. What the hell is that?
We got a plane overhead.
There's a big plane.
Yeah.
It's not moving, it's just hovering.
It's the guy from the Falkland Islands. He said he's seeking revenge. I'll get that guy that was running around stage if it takes me 20 years.
We'll get him. That was a big plane.
Still is.
Well, yeah. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, is it?
He's almost gone.
Yeah. We'll
Oh,
just
so
wrap up
yes.
about the.
So in some ways, you're working with Rick Wakeman, who was classically trained at the Royal Academy of Music in London, and then Steve Howe had so many musical dreams to do classical guitar music, and so in some ways you can incorporate all these, and especially with Bill Bruford, he was a jazz player, so he was on a totally different level, and so you had so many variations working with musicians, and you could dance them here and move them there, and they would listen close to the edge, thematic music, and I could actually envisage ideas with them, and as they were rehearsing that, I'd be thinking of the next part, and I'd study what the next part could be and how we could get to the next section and so on. So eventually we started doing longer form pieces of music, and so we were never really put together as a sort of pop band. We were put together as a bunch of musicians doing what we call progressive music. And there is still progressive music now. There's always progressive music. Zappa was the best progressive music in the 60s, you know. The Beatles were progressive, you know.
Sure.
You know, Sgt. Pepper,
Sgt.
my
Pepper,
God.
absolutely.
The White Album. God help us.
Yeah. We're going to be right back with so much more of our special guest, John Anderson, the voice of Yes, on the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
Know me many lives distant, they can see the light. Been here many lives distant, know where I am from. Show me many moon singers, know they're dreaming me.
Hey, stay close.
Yeah, we'll be right back on the Blake Aaron Radio Show. Hey, welcome to the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
Hey, and I'm Blake Aaron, and that's Tina Anderson. And we're back with our special guest, John Anderson, the voice of Yes, who will be playing tomorrow night, actually, which is the 22nd of February at Anthology. And solo, actually.
Yep.
A lot of new songs, I imagine, that you're going to be performing?
Well, yeah, you like to put in 2 or 3 new ideas each tour. So I do some Yes classics, of course, John Vangelis songs, and new songs from my last album, plus a couple of very new things that I've been working on. So I just keep mixing it up.
We were talking before about your contribution to Yes almost as the director, per se. What I think is fascinating is you actually weren't formally trained.
No.
And yet you were responsible for some of the most complex music that Yes has ever put out, like Awaken and Close to the Edge and Gates of Delirium.
Yeah.
And, we're not talking more than just, what people might think of the hits Roundabout and that kind of thing.
Right.
Multiple time signatures, multiple keys, all kinds of stuff that you hadn't studied, and yet you're creating this wonderful music.
Well, a lot had to do with the way the band would work. Like Gates of Delirium, I played on the piano all the way through and took it to the band, and of course they helped in really creating it correctly, because it must have sounded terrible when I played it on the piano, but it gave them an idea of where we could go and where the music could take us and the journey. But the time signatures, a lot of that came from Chris and the drummer, Chris and Alan White. Sure. They get into routines, and I'd walk through the studio on my way to doing something, whatever, and they'd be playing this riff and and so on. I'd come back, they'd still be playing it 2 hours later. I'd say, guys, can you change key? Try. And Rick, can you double it? Can you double that? Okay, just do it. And I'd remember it and tape it. And then we'd be halfway through a piece of music. I'd say, oh, listen to what you were doing 2 days ago. Listen to this. Let's do that now. Right. And that's how we would work, I'd always have my tape recorder going all the time, listening to people play little things, and say, this is really a gem. Let's put it in this song, and let's double it with guitar, and so on and so on. And it was always a very wonderful way of working with other musicians. They're very free-form ideas that you could collectively put together, and everybody was willing to try. I said, there's no harm in just trying ideas for a couple of hours. If it doesn't work, hey, it doesn't work. But let's not get caught up in something that takes 2 days to decide it's horrible.
Sure.
Let's just figure it out now and then decide and put it away to one side, and we'll come back to it,
Bill Kilpatrick was telling me of a similar story about you knocking on the hotel room of Steve Howe, who was doing an exercise, and you constructed it in different keys, and it became Awaken.
Yeah. I was on my way to breakfast, and he was playing down, 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 down. And I said, that's really nice, Steve. And he turned around, hi. I came back an hour later, he's still playing it. And I said, Steve, try a different key. And he played it in a different key. And then try another key, and he did. And I started singing the line, and we recorded it right away. And then we finished that part, and I said, that was really good. It was like more of a choral idea. And then I said, okay, can you just play as many chords as you can in one roll? So he played about 8, 9 chords all together in a roll. I said, right, repeat them, keep repeating. And I started singing the stanza that became the second part. So it was just, you're in the same room with somebody, and all of a sudden something happens, and you put it away on a cassette, and then I'd start thinking about it. By the time we got to recording the Going for the One album, which was probably about 6 months later, I remembered that whole idea. And why don't we go into a sort of a East meets West sort of piece of music, very Eastern flavor, very raga, like a raga or something like that. And that's how things happened. You just go for it.
Bill was also telling me that when you guys write together, that even though that you're not trained, you don't just come up with major and minor triads. I mean, you're doing altered dominance and augmented diminished, all kinds of different harmonies. And Bill told me that you don't know exactly what they are. You just hear
True.
those things in your head.
True.
Which is
Well,
amazing.
We're writing a piece now called First Nation or Star Nation. We haven't decided yet. And I just said to him, send me a piece of music that's more like a bitonal, one chord just running along. And he did. And all of a sudden I started singing this idea and I sent it back to him and he understood where I was going. I said, now do some more orchestration around it and start following the melodies that I'm singing and so on. So we started constructing this. You can explain a little bit better, I think.
That very well explained right there. It's a beautiful piece, and I think we're getting there a little bit at a time. What I thought was wonderful was I received a folder in my inbox with, I would say, 20 vocal tracks that John had put together for this piece.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
As I'm sitting in my room mixing the ideas, the different voices together, my wife will pop her head in and just say, that's absolutely beautiful. And to me, it's fantastic to hear an entire choir of John singing all at once.
Oh, so they weren't 20 different takes that you were choosing from. They're 20 parts that all work
They're
together.
all in there, baby.
Wow.
Harmonies. Well, it's interesting. I was going to mention something the other day. I was listening to it, and what happened was one of the voices on the computer had lapped over the actual track of yours just at a certain point. So when it came to that, the orchestra stopped and all these vocals started singing, and the orchestra came back in. I thought, hey, that's really cool. We should do that. So I'll talk about it. I know exactly where it is now, so we'll talk about that later. The idea of giving the orchestra a break and do this vocalization, and then the orchestra come back in. It'll be
Great.
kind of cool.
Okay.
But it's a work in progress. We started this a month ago, and maybe a little longer.
I think that actually was before Christmas.
Before
we
Christmas.
started working on this.
And it's something that will eventually, we'll know when it's finished.
Yes.
We did a song last year called Surfing with God, which was a beautiful piece of music that Bill sent me, and all of a sudden I'm singing about surfing with God. I sort of instantly write a melody and then lyrical just pop in there, and I keep thinking of Bill because he's a surfer dude. And
There you go. I knew I was
Surfer
right.
dude.
right, and Surfing with God is a lovely song, and we'll probably put it out this summer, I hope.
Right.
Just got to figure out how to put it out, when and how.
And are you just working back and forth via computer? I'm imagining that you have like Logic or something. You've got orchestral samples and
Right.
that kind of thing that you're using. And you said at some point, are you going to have a real orchestra record this?
It would be great.
It would be lovely, yes.
Hey,
I'm
from your-
slowly putting the pieces together in finale so that if somebody steps up to the plate someday and
It
says,
would
here
be
we
good.
go.
You
We'll be
never know.
ready.
You never know.
I've known this guy for years. I didn't even know he was that talented. I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
always knew he was talented, but not that talented.
No, he's good. He's
He
good.
thought I was just a guitar player.
Yeah.
If I can jump back to Surfing with God for just a second here, it is on a YouTube video.
It is actually.
So
yeah.
if you type in Surfing with God on YouTube, John's name will pop up, and give it a listen, give it a look and a listen. It's actually a beautiful video because it was made in memory of a surfer who lost his life surfing.
Oh.
And as I've said to John after that video appeared, I said, I don't think either one of us were thinking of the idea of surfing with God after your time here is through. But
True.
what a beautiful use of that
Yeah.
song.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you said that when you directed Yes, that
Well, they wouldn't like that word. They used to call me Napoleon.
I heard.
But I helped direct them musically in directions that I think not many bands ever tried. And we were kind of unique in that way. And I know that music still survives because it's so well constructed.
Fortunately, they were still, pretty open to your ideas.
Yeah.
Which, if they weren't, perhaps Yes wouldn't have been as experimental and
Yeah.
as groundbreaking
That's
as,
true.
as possibly they were.
That's true.
I also had read that some of the guys weren't into quite some of the mysticism of the lyrics that Yes wrote, that you wrote for Yes.
Well, not many people, especially in the record business, not many people understood what I was singing about, and at times neither did I. But I was studying so many religions and so many ways to the divine, to the God, and I was trying to figure out what was it all about. So as I was a seeker, I was singing about being a seeker and trying to understand close to the edge of what? Close to the edge of enlightenment. And that's where I was going all the time, trying to understand why I was successful. What does it mean to be successful? And eventually, and thanking the gods, I was able to find a spiritual path, you know.
Are you actually surprised by your own success?
Oh, God, yeah.
Really?
There's so many people trying to get success out there, and I was one of them, and all of a sudden I became successful. So it was a shock in many ways. And all I wanted to do is to hold on to that feeling that created our success. And it had very little to do with pop music. It didn't really have anything to do with, and it still doesn't. You know,
Right.
it's all to do with working in creation and working your best at what you can do. Not chasing that golden rainbow. It's just following your consciousness, your state of mind, and following your dream. And I've still got a lot of dreams to fulfill, so I'm very happy about that.
It's funny, you would think in that time period, the end of the 60s and through the 70s, that record companies, musicians, the audience would be completely open to lyrics that were very mystical, very soul-searching, very
Yeah.
spiritual. It surprises me to hear that maybe that they were hesitant.
Well, I'm only saying about record companies were more interested in what's going to be a hit.
Sure.
And anything that touched on religion or anything near there was always sort of taboo in a way.
Really?
Well, in those days, it was like, maybe I'm wrong, because, you know, a hit song is a hit song. It doesn't really matter.
Sure.
It's just that I was very interested in the journey
Right.
and, you know, the spiritual quest. I still am. It's an everyday thing to me. So it's just something people say, well, you're very spiritual. And I say, well, we all are, really. I just like singing about it. It's the way I am, you know.
Well, I think what possibly might separate you from some is that while we all might be spiritual, we can be closed off to the input. There's always input coming in,
Sure.
but some of us
That's a
are
good
more
way of
closed off,
putting
some
it.
of us are more connected.
Yeah, well, there's so much going on in life. And you got to quieten down at least once a day just to be calm and quiet and connect, you know.
It's a tough thing to do. I mean,
know.
especially, I don't know, I'm a musician as well.
Yeah.
My mind is always racing. So the concept of really being quiet, even in my mind, that's actually difficult to do.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's just a constant conundrum. Is that the right word? It's a constant need to be calm and reflect and then relax and just stop thinking. It's something you train yourself to do, and it doesn't always work. It's not like, oh yeah, I just meditate every day and there's no problem. No, I go through the same need to calm down. The spirit comes through and switch off the ego mind, because it starts talking about, am I going to have something for dinner later, or what am I going to watch on TV later, or what's going to happen tomorrow. And all of a sudden you get caught up in this whole flurry of ideas and mental things, and you got to say no, and then you start doing your mantra, and that really breaks that down and takes you back to that place of oneness with all that is, the
And you do that
divine.
before every show, right?
I do it, yeah. I do it. I love doing it. It doesn't always work, but I love doing it. You know, I love trying, you know.
You seem like, you know, one of these guys that through that has everything together before every show. Do you still go to shows and feel totally stressed out when you hit the first note?
No.
You don't?
No. I just go on stage very clear and light and let it happen. It's got really nothing to do with me, the person.
Surrender.
It's me. Yeah, I surrender and let it happen, and let's hope it works.
We'll be right back with lots more on the Blake Aaron Radio Show. Welcome to another edition of the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
That's Blake Aaron, and I'm Tina Anderson.
It's the Blake Aaron Radio Show, and we are back with our special guest, John Anderson. And been talking about all kinds of great stuff, including his solo project as well as many years with Yes. But not just Yes, you've done stuff with people from King Crimson to Iron Butterfly to writing ballet to work with Vangelis and even Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. How did that come about?
I'm a big fan of Bella Fleck, for one thing. He's a great banjo. Is it banjo?
Yeah.
Banjo player. And he just got in touch with me out of the blue. Would I sing on his album? I said, I'd love to. And he came by to near where I lived, there's a studio nearby. So we just got in there for a day and I sang this song for him. But I actually wanted to tour, Yes, with Bella Fleck, and the management at that moment in time thought it wasn't the best match, and I said, no, they're amazing.
They are.
You know, let's and we went on tour with Kansas, and I thought, you know, that's sort of interesting, nice guys, but not the kind of music that I was sort of edging towards to work with. You know, you want to work with different people that do different kinds of music, you know. So working with Vangelis was amazing. You know, he was probably the first keyboard player. He was the first guy that I ever saw play 4 or 5 keyboards from one sound to another sound. And he created a very famous piece of music called Chariots of Fire for that movie. And that's when he came to live in London. He actually nearly joined Yes.
Really?
Yeah, Rick Wakeman had left the band halfway through, I think it was 74 or 5 or something like that, because he was having success with his solo albums, and I just thought Vangelis would be perfect for the band, so I invited him over. He was living in Paris, and he came to London to rehearse with the band, and I think the first thing he said to Steve was, well, you know, the electric guitar is not a real instrument, you know.
Oh!
And I thought, wait a minute, Vangelis, you're supposed to be joining the band, not getting kicked out. You know. So, you know, we became like brothers, you know. We actually, all the music we did was very spontaneous. And in fact, everything we did was always the first take. And we'd keep the first take of an idea, and then we'd go on to another idea, and then, you know, we'd probably do about 5 or 6 ideas in the space of an hour or two. And then we'd go on the following day and do the same thing. So 5 days later, we had all these ideas, and he would edit them together and develop the music that he was trying to create. And I'd listen to what I was trying to sing and figure out the lyrics and things like that. And some of the best music, they could call it jazz or chance music. Some of the best music is created like that.
Sure.
When you don't have to sit down and try and write a song. You create a song when it's just spontaneous, you know, like I did with Bill. It's like I do with people all the time. It's a real fun thing to do, to create in a spontaneous method, if you like.
Which is fairly different than the way you would compose with Yes, right? Because
with Yes, I'd take songs along, and songs that I wrote with Steve. He was such a great guitar player. He knew more chords than I could ever imagine. So when we wrote together, it was more like writing music that I could never write by myself. But I'd write songs like, you know, Starship Trooper. I'd start ideas for Long Distance Runaround, Close to the Edge, which I did write with Steve. But there were certain sections that I wrote by myself, and you inject them into the band, and it's then you're talking about structure. You're back into the construction of music.
right.
Whereas with Vangelis, it was totally the opposite. It was very spontaneous and an incredible joy to work with. And I always remember I was actually living in Los Angeles working on an album called The Big Generator.
Sure.
And which took forever to make.
Did it?
Yeah, well, that's another story. But he rang me up. He was actually in New York. Now, Vangelis hated flying. He hated it. You would not believe. So he rang me up. Hey, John, I'm in New York. Would you please come to New York and fly with me to London on the Concorde?
Wow.
I said, Vangelis, I'm working on an album. Oh, please, John, you're my best friend. Please, I don't want to fly back to London, but I have to go back. I have to go back because I'm going to court. Somebody has accused me of stealing Chariots of Fire from his song. And it's not true. And he was crying on the phone. Oh,
Wow.
Vangelis, that's not true. You create music like there's no tomorrow. I know, but I have to go to court. Please come with me and testify for me. And come on the Concorde with me. I'm so scared of flying. Okay, Vangelis. Wait a minute. So I got a red eye that night. And I flew to New York. And I got to his hotel. And he was in a state. He was in a terrible state. Oh, I don't want to fly. I don't want to fly. Vangelis, I've just flown from LA to New York, and you don't want to go. Oh, John, I'm sorry. I said, no, we're going. So we got to the airport, and his doctor's there at the airport giving him pills or something. Oh, I don't really want to get on the plane. I said, look, Vangelis, it's the Concorde. It's safe. We're going to be there before you know it. We'll be there in 2 minutes, you know.
Right.
So we're sort of just outside where the gate is to get onto the Concorde, and Vangelis sits down and he puts his head in his hand and says, I'm not getting on the plane. Vangelis, you got to get on the plane. I've done all this. I've come all the way from LA. We got to get on the plane. Your luggage is on the plane. We got to get on the plane. And just at that moment, Princess Margaret walks by with all her entourage and gets on the plane. I said, Vangelis, you got to get on the plane. Why? Princess Margaret just got on and there'll be an international incident if you don't get on the plane. Princess Margaret? he pushed past me and he got on the plane.
Oh, wow.
And he had to say hello to Princess Margaret. And he shook hands with Princess Margaret. And then he sat down and he fell asleep. All the way to London, he was asleep.
Perfect. Whatever works.
The pills had kicked in, you know. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute. He wanted me to be with him on the flight.
To watch him sleep.
Watch him sleep. But man, we had so much fun together. We did 4 albums together, which did very well. Reached a lot of people.
I bet. I mean, not only Vangelis, you've done work for one of your songs got into St. Elmo's Fire.
That was interesting. I actually went into the studio looking for this engineer. I've been told this engineer was really, really good. So I went into the studio, and there was David Foster playing the piano. And he said, hi. I said, I'm looking for Alonzo, the engineer. Oh, he's not here. So he's messing around on the piano. And he said, I'm trying to write this song. So I started writing the song with him, you know. I said, what's it for? He said, oh, it's a movie. Oh, cool, let's just do it. So we did it, and that was it. And before you know it, it was actually in a movie, and it did very well. And I think it was only about a month later, I found Alfonso. He was working with another guy in another studio in New York. And I went in to find him, and he'd gone for lunch. And there was a guy at the piano writing something. And he was a guy called Jonathan Elias. And I said, what are you trying to do? He says, oh, I'm writing a commercial. He wrote songs for commercials. I said, what are you trying to write? He said, well, the line is, have you driven a Ford lately? And I said, have you driven a Ford lately? And he said, that's it.
You're kidding. So you actually wrote that melody.
With him. Because he started playing the piano, and then I said, that was it. Have you driven a Ford lately?
I had no idea. John
I know.
Emerson wrote the
So
Ford
funny.
commercial.
It's crazy.
Wow. Yes has gone through so many different phases of, the 80s was certainly a different phase
Sure.
than the 70s, which was more experimental.
Yeah.
Is there an album that really stands out to you that's just like, this is what I'm most proud of?
Well, you're proud of everything you do. The Close to the Edge, Fragile. Parts of Topographic just blow my mind when I think about them, what we were entering into. And, of course, Gates of Delirium, Sound Chaser, Awaken. Awaken is my favorite Yes piece. But the last album we actually did together called Magnification. It's still a very beautiful album. And unfortunately, the record company went bankrupt a month into the release, so it didn't get really helped along, even though it was still a great piece of music. You know, I think I get into this place a little bit like Steve Martin said when somebody asked him, so what do you think about your career? And he said, well, I think 50% of what I've done is really good and 50% isn't. And I think that's a pretty good line. You know,
Yeah.
50% of what I've done is really great and 50% isn't, you know.
Well, if you think about, you know, any career, I mean, you have to, in order to hit the ball out of the park, I mean, you got to strike out.
Hey, there are some people that do it all the time, but hey, God bless them.
And
you know?
by the way, speaking of which, I didn't know that you wanted to be a football player at one time.
Well, I come from a very small town in England called Accrington, and Accrington Stanley is the name of the team. It's still there today. It still survives. And I was the ball boy, and actually the mascot when I was 10 years old. And I was the ball boy for the team, and all I wanted to do was to play for the team and play for England. And they were one of the first 11 teams that were the first league that was ever created in 1878, I think it was. They were one of the first 11 teams that
Right.
created the first league.
Now, we're talking not rugby, but soccer, right?
Soccer.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Americans call it-
Please, you know. Hey, I'm an American, you know, by the way.
I know you
I
just got
became
your
an
citizenship
American,
after
yeah.
living here, 25 years?
I know. I thought it was about time I became an American. I can say what I want now. They can't throw me out.
Do you still do, I know you keep healthy and you walk and you do all that, but do you still do sports?
No, I just walk a lot. And,
Right.
you know, I in my dreams, I play soccer. And, you know, I'm an American football fan. You know, me and my wife are 49er fans, so we had a great year this year.
Oh, cool.
And we nearly got to the big one,
Yeah,
so we were happy.
right.
We had 10 years of terrible teams, but very good players, but very badly put together. And thank God we had a great season this last season.
Yeah, sure did. We're going to be right back with so much more of John Anderson, the Blake Aaron Radio Show. Right back with more.
On the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
Hey, it's the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
That's Blake Aaron, and I'm Tina Anderson.
And we are back with our very special guest, John Anderson, the voice of Yes. And one thing we haven't really touched on too much is your family. Your son and daughters are musical as well, right?
Oh, very, very. I'm writing songs with Damien now. He's 40 years old, and he's really got his act together. It's taken a while, but he's such a good composer. And he started writing song ideas last summer, and he stopped partying. He was a party guy, good-looking dude, traveled the world partying his life away. And now he's singing and writing songs, and we're writing some songs together, so I'm very excited about him. My eldest daughter, she's 42. She lives, at the moment, she's in Malibu. She's a beautiful photographer, incredible composer of songs. She does these long-form pieces. I don't know where she gets that from.
I have no idea.
No idea.
Who could possibly imagine
But she's
that?
an incredible photographer. She's making a movie about porn star ladies, and a real look at them from a different angle than just what the job they do, and how they're just really beautiful women inside on many levels. And so she's creating a movie about that. And my youngest, she's 30 years old, Jade. She's actually in London doing charity work this week. She's doing a big charity project. She does a lot of charities, a lot for animals, and a lot for children. And now she's doing one for the growing awareness of spirituality. And they're all very connected. I have to thank my wife Jane for that. She took on my children from my first marriage and really helped them along over that difficult time when you go through a divorce. And my wife Janie is an angel on many levels. and she helped them in so many ways to grow and to want to attain a spiritual awareness in this life, and they've really grown up so beautiful. As you can see, I'm very happy about them.
Oh, that's great. That's great. One thing I read that I thought was amazing is when you married your wife, Jane, you're on your honeymoon, you still actually did some recording during your honeymoon.
Well, we were there. In fact, we just finished an album with the Yes called Keys to Ascension, and we were going to go on tour, and me and my wife Jane, we were renting at that time, so we just said, okay, we'll go and spend a month while the show is put together. We'll go to Maui, and we did. We had rented this place on the golf course, and it fell through, and the agent got very upset and said, but we have this other place which is on its own 15 acres, and it's like it's far away from anybody. It's got its own beach. Do you want to stay there? And I said, does it have TV? I said, oh yeah, it's got a satellite. I said, yes, we'll stay there. So we went to stay there, and we started composing. I started composing a project at that time, and then Rick Wakeman decided he didn't want to tour, so he said, can we have the place for 5 months? And she said, yeah. And I looked at Jane and said, will you marry me? Let's get married. And then we got married there.
Wow.
It was amazing.
But talk about dedication that you're still doing music and recording during your, technically, what's your honeymoon?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We were in this house which was by the beach, and it was a very open house, and so I'd be recording and writing songs, and the birds would be singing away, and they came onto the recording. You could hear them on the recording. The album's called Earth, Mother Earth, and it's probably one of the first albums ever recorded into a computer. There was no studio.
Wow.
It was one of the first, I forgot, Cakewalk was the technology that was, and it was on this computer, and I recorded it all acoustic, and it was one of those wonderful things. I'd be singing this one song, and I kept, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I kept hearing this beautiful bird singing away, and I thought, gosh, I wish I could get a microphone near that tree. So the following day, of course, 4 o'clock comes, the bird comes again. So the third day, I'm still singing that same song around that time, and I got the microphone and I put it under the tree, and I started singing the song and recording, and the bird was in a different tree, and it moved over there. So I thought, okay, well, the following day I put the microphone over there, and the bird went to the other tree. He was playing a game. So eventually I gave it up. And about 2 weeks later, I thought, I'll listen to that song and see what it sounds like. And would you believe that bird is singing all the way through it?
Is that right?
It was
Wow.
magic. And the funny thing is, if you listen very closely, there are birds singing on the first verse of the first song on the album. And when it comes to the bridge, the doves start singing.
Wow.
It's bizarre. You know,
Well, it's just like we haven't shared this with our listeners. When John was talking about spirituality, there was, and we're outside right now at Humphreys in the beautiful garden. There was a hummingbird. John didn't even notice. There was a hummingbird that was hanging out, and I mean hanging out, about it must have been maybe 6 inches from John's right ear. Wow. Just hanging out there, just checking John out, looking at him, and I thought you knew he was there.
no,
Yeah.
they'll do that.
He wants to be on the next record, I think.
That's it. He's like, hey, listen, I heard you put out an ad, musicians
Hey,
wanted.
hey.
Are you up for having a
I'm in.
hummingbird doing a collaboration?
It's so bizarre because three days ago, out of the blue, I said to Jane, if I come back, I want to come back as a hummingbird.
Hey,
Isn't that wonderful?
Wow.
that is
What a
kind
life. What a life.
of
Beautiful.
yeah.
Okay, I got to go.
All right. Well, just one last thing. I know that you express yourself also in your painting. How's that going? And are you still painting often?
Yeah, I paint quite a lot. When I'm at home, I've got some new canvases ready. When I get home this time, I'll be doing some painting. I just do free-form ideas. The only thing that I ever did which was like a sort of blocked out idea that I wanted to do, was when I was very sick, I really couldn't sing for a long time, for about 5 months. And so I decided to do a painting. And I painted this mural that's 25 foot long. and
Wow.
3 foot wide, and it's going to be donated next year to the Children's Hospital at Stanford, where I do
you.
my operations.
Wow. That's
And
very
it's
nice.
just a wonderful experience to go through creating a piece of art that you spend weeks and weeks working on. It's just a wonderful experience.
What a great
to go
cause
through.
that'll
yeah.
be going to, and you'll be,
Yeah,
making a lot of kids happy.
yeah. It's a lot of fun to do that kind of thing. I just paint really more for meditational quietness. You just get into that zone and just paint this sort of, I'll just do something,
Right.
rather than, I've got to do something. No, I'll just do something and let go and just paint.
Right.
A little bit like surfing.
Always looking for the best wave.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's
That's
true.
right.
It's true.
John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So appreciate having you.
Thank you so
on
much.
the show, and it's been an absolute pleasure. You are welcome anytime. You will be playing tomorrow night, the 22nd, at Anthology. Just you and a guitar and a ukulele and just about every string instrument that you can possibly think of.
Yep.
And that's what, about 8 o'clock, I'm assuming.
7:30.
7:30.
It'll be wonderful. Come along and have a good time.
And by the way, I want to let you know that if you're interested in John Anderson's music or Bill Kilpatrick's or their music together, plenty of websites you can go to. It's johnanderson.com, and that's Jon Anderson.com. And Bill, tell us about your website and where the people can go.
Well, we've got a MySpace for violin stores. If you'd like to hear that music, it's just myspace.com/John and Bill. And as I said before, Surfing with God can be found on YouTube. Just type in Surfing with God, and it'll pop right up.
We wish you the best of luck in the rest of your tour, and peace and safe travels. Once again, thank you, John Anderson.
Thank you.
Such a strange preoccupation, such a strange peculiar breed. How it's shining in its armor, sun calling, shut with open eyes to the miracle of life below the deepest.
Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Blake Aaron Radio Show.
Have yourself a great rest of your day.